Today we're going to be doing something a bit different than our previous videos. Today it's going to be a little bit of an intervention and it might be a bit personal, but please bear with me. Now we all do love the past, but being a history geek sometimes comes with certain occupational hazards. Today I'm going to be talking about the traps we all fall into, basically mental shortcuts that actually distorts our vision of the past and doesn't give us a true clear picture. I've put together 10 mistakes we all make, and honestly, I'm guilty of at least half of them. Let's see how many you recognize. Number 1, presentism. It's basically judging the past by today's standards. It's the urge to scream, why didn't they just do this or do that at a historical figure? We judge them for not having our 21st century ethics. But we forget they didn't have our context. For example, we often bash the Byzantines for being obsessed with blinding their political rivals instead of killing them. To us, it's barbaric, it's clear, but in their world, a blind man couldn't be an emperor. So basically, blinding them was actually seen as a merciful alternative to execution. It was their version of a humane political exit. Number 2, the one true source. We've all found that one book or creator or author who just clicks and suddenly their word is law. But relying on one source is like trying to see a 3D object from one angle. Think about the Viking horned helmet. For decades, people cited the 19th century costume designs for Wagner's operas as the source for saying yes, Vikings did wear horned helmets. But when archaeologists started to cross-reference burial archaeology with actual records, then we realized the horns were a total myth, and Vikings wore normal iron helmets. Number 3, the great man trap. It's easy to focus on kings, Caesars, and Napoleons. They're basically the main characters, right? But focusing on them ignores the 99% of the population who actually built the world we all fantasize about. We credit the building of the transcontinental railroads to titans like Stanford and Durant. But the real story is in the roughly 15,000 Chinese laborers who literally hung from baskets over cliffs in the Sierra Nevadas to set the dynamites. Without their specific engineering techniques, the great men would have no railroad to name. Number 4, romanticizing the golden age. We love a good period drama aesthetic, but we often forget the smells. History isn't a fairy tale. It's usually pretty gritty. Take the Renaissance in Venice. We imagine gondolas and silk and the amazing water streets of Venice, but we don't imagine the Poveglia Island, a literal dumping ground for plague victims that was so packed with bodies that even today the soil on the island is roughly 50% human ash. The Golden Age had a very dark underbelly, and we should keep this in mind. Number 5, ignoring geography. History doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens on a map. If you don't look at the terrain, the decisions then make no sense. Why did the Mongol Empire stop at the border of Central Europe? Many think it was a military defeat, but geography was the main player here. A great wet period in the 1240s turned the Hungarian plains into a giant swamp. The Mongols' horse-based logistics literally sank in the mud. The weather did more than any sword could. Number 6, confusing correlation with causation. And it basically means that just because event A happened before event B, it doesn't mean that A caused B. For example, many people argue that the Treaty of Versailles caused the rise of Adolf Hitler and the Nazis. The timing makes it tempting. Germany was humiliated and economically strained after the treaty, and 2 decades later, Hitler came to power. But while the treaty contributed to instability, it was not the sole cause. The Great Depression, political fragmentation in the Weimar Republic, fear of communism, and elite miscalculations all played crucial roles. The treaty came before Hitler, but that does not mean it alone caused his rise. Number 7, questioning the narrative. History is written by survivors. They usually want to look like the good guys. We're often taught that the Library of Alexandria was destroyed by a single barbarian fire that wiped out all human knowledge. In reality, the library died over centuries due to boring budget cuts, lack of maintenance, and most importantly, scholars simply moved to other cities. The Grand Fire narrative is a dramatic myth used to blame specific villains for a slow decade. And remember, correlation does not equate causation. Number 8. Seeing the bigger picture. We get so obsessed with the small details. I think almost everyone watching is guilty of this in one way or another. Well, in my case, when I was young, I was so obsessed with the Roman military attire that I forgot to research what made their military so formidable. Basically, we have to ask ourselves this question: why did it matter? Right? You might know every detail of the Titanic's construction, but did you know its sinking was a real catalyst for the creation of the International Ice Patrol? If you only study the details, you miss how that one disaster fundamentally changed global maritime law and how we view safety today. So I think at some point we should take a step back and look at the bigger picture and maybe leave the details for when we have spare time. Number 9. Underestimating ancient tech. We have this primitive bias where we think people in the past were less intelligent. They weren't. They just had a different set of tools. Look at Roman concrete. We only recently figured out their secret ingredient, volcanic ash, and a process called hot mixing. Their concrete actually self-heals when it cracks and gets stronger when exposed to seawater. We're only now just learning a technology they perfected 2,000 years ago. Number 10. Thinking that history is finished. And I believe this is one of the biggest mistakes historians and history geeks do throughout their life. Thinking that we already know the final version. And that's not true. History is a living, breathing thing. For centuries, historians knew the Mayan civilization was a collection of small, isolated city-states. Then, in 2018, we used LiDAR, and that's basically laser screening, over the Guatemalan jungle, and found over 60,000 previously unknown structures. Suddenly, the Maya population estimation jumped from a few million to 20 million. History changed overnight, so we should also keep in mind that history is ever evolving, and we should keep an open mind regarding what we consider facts and opinions. So how many of those have you done? I've definitely been guilty of a little romanticizing myself, but that's the beauty of history. The more we realize our mistakes, the closer we get to the truth. If you learned something new today, hit that like button. Stay curious, and I'll see you in the next century.